But did you get a chance to read the script, White Lily?
I did.
You read the whole script?
Yeah, I read the whole script. I read it last night.
Pretty impressive. Because it's 110 pages, right?
Yeah.
What was your take? And you can be as critical as you like.
Honestly, I didn't. First of all, we were having a conversation before. I had no idea it was a true story. So to me, it was always it was fascinating because I'm trying to wrap my head like, but I don't really believe that a girl would be a Russian
can't do
player.
that.
Well, at that time, you're just like, I don't believe that actually happened. But the fact that it did was just eye opening. It was pretty fantastic. I mean, I think
it's based on a true story because I was going to actually speak to that. You were talking about a closed story. Listen, these were women that would have passed away by now anyway due to old age, and yet some readers, when they read the true story, are very upset that they die.
Yeah.
Which is weird to me. So, right? I'm speaking out of turn here? Is that correct, Preston?
It is. I mean, I'm part of a writers group, and I go and I present pages, and when people are hearing that story for the first time, they're always, is this alternate Earth? I'm like, no, that really happened. And I'm like, well, one, it just goes to show how little we understand of our Cold War enemies and where they were coming from. Yeah. Because I mean, we like to think here in the United States that we were the lead on women's rights, but when it came to women in combat, we weren't. And that wasn't because necessarily the Soviets were the most progressive. They just ran out of people. And it takes certain skills to fly a plane, and when the Nazis are killing everybody you put out there, you run out of qualified pilots real quick. And so the question is, well, we can just not have pilots, or we can use these women. And so they did. Very
similar to England during the Blitz. They had more planes than pilots. And that's somewhat unknown. And also partly it was Lend-Lease. America was giving them planes, but that was not really their forte. They preferred their own planes. But also the Soviet system was an egalitarian system in theory. So everyone was equal, to the point that they even wear insignia. Yeah. Well, in 1942, when essentially it was, quite honestly, do or die completely. They were going to meet their end in a very brutal sense as a country. Nothing is off the table at that point. So these women showed a propensity for training the men. And I think that may have been one of the reasons they tapped them to be... Not all of them were promoted to the fighter units. In fact, I was talking to Russians this last weekend in a completely separate context, and I threw the idea, do you know who White Lily is? They said, no. I go, do you don't know who the Lily of Stalingrad? No. Do you know about the Night Witches? Oh, yeah, everyone knows about the Night Witches. Well, why is that? Anyway, so there's a whole discussion there that goes very deep, but the bottom line is that these girls showed they could, these women, showed they could do it beyond, by the way, the scope of even what we would call success. They were super successes. Yeah. The two we're talking about here, Katya and Lilia. There were others. In fact, when they were deployed, none of them had any kills and didn't get any kills for a couple weeks. And the squadron, the women squadron commander, Reza, correct?
Squadron commander was Tamara.
I'm sorry. When they were transferred, the first four of the first 8. Yeah. But anyway, Reza, who I kind of take as sort of a kind of almost like a gothy kind of a rebel girl. Yeah. She was like in charge, and she was, really tough and really interesting and sexy as hell, I think. And she didn't get a kill, and Lilia didn't either. Lilia's first kill was shooting a German fighter off Reza's tail. So it gives you a real sense that she didn't really get that taste for blood until she had to save one of her own. And then she was off to the races. But then also politics played a heavy part. And it's really hard to tell the true story because it's so unbelievable. Right. And I think this is often true. That's why they say reality is stranger than fiction, right? That's why you can't write reality. You have to write fiction.
Exactly. And it's a funny thing, actually, because, in talking about the script, because I read it, obviously with an eye towards the comic side of things. Right. And you could, look at the script and say, from the movie studio perspective, like, where's your arc here and where's your crisis moment there? But I think what's nice about the world that graphic novels has started to come into form in the last 10 years or so is they're making comic books about anything in any format in any way they want.
Where's the action on this page?
Right. Exactly. There is no action. You're holding the whole thing. You want to get the action, go flip back to that page. And there's something about that that's interesting. You look at great graphic novels like I Kill Giants, and Road to Perdition was a great book, and Mouse is a great book, and all of these things that really aren't very oriented towards the X-Men's and the Batmans of the world. And I think it's a fun structural thing to say, look, this is just a historical account of how this happened. We don't need to hit the proper 3-act structure. We don't need to sell you the studio version of these people like you're just
sounds like
about.
You're being very kind here.
Yeah,
but no, I mean, like, there's something about it that, like, you read and you're just like you said, like, these events happen, and them happening is the kind of thing that's like, that is interesting. That isn't like, those aren't the things that should be removed.
Right.
You know, those are the things that should stand out and be like, look, this is how it went down. I don't want to see this Tudors version. You know, where you're like, wait. Who killed who? When? How did that happen?
I've lost track in Game of Thrones.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I love it, but they're all dying. I guess.
Yeah, everyone dies. That's all you know. Everyone dies. But there's something about that feels like, you know, in the graphic novel space, you get excited about, like, I don't have to punch. I don't have to pull punches here. You can step into that forefront and be like, these things happened, and I don't have to, like you're saying, like, there's no Romeo and Juliet story here. There's no, you know, weird romance that she needs to come into grips with her own, you know, feminism at the same time, because that's not who she was. I mean, she seemed like she was James Bond from the opening pages, and she just needed an opportunity to use that skill set. But if that's who she was, that's who should be standing out in the front of the pages.
And that's what I think Preston's script is speaking to, and I think that's why it's relevant to, well, any audience really at any time, is women, I don't think, are any different than men. They want exactly the same thing. They have different skills. They're unique in each individual, and they want the opportunity to maybe be recognized for those skills or fail in the attempt. And I think maybe much of what you were referring to, how like the Soviets may have been a little bit more open to women's lib because they had to for survival. But I think a lot of times, especially in California, because I've lived on both coasts, we're very liberal here, and we were very convinced of our own well, let's say progressiveness. Yeah. But in all that jargon, we actually lose the, in fact, factual de facto, if you will, liberalness. Yeah. You know, I'm going to allow you to be who you are. Now just go ahead and follow this set of rules. Yep. And I think in this story, they are exactly who they are. And maybe Lilia is the most idealized sense of who she is. And I think we get that in history. I mean, if you look online, there are some followings online for her. They're very romanticized. Like there's a kind of a tear in the eye of the viewer, if you will. And I don't think she herself wanted that.
Yeah, I loved the scene with her and Alexia, you know, where they sleep together and she's the one who's got to tell him, like, you know, what's your deal, pal? Like,
I think I heard that a couple weeks ago, actually, myself. Yeah. But yeah, no, exactly. You get it. You got that.
No, I like that. I like even the I think with that scene, and my favorite other scene was the scene with her and Katya, where it's like, I won't be your girlfriend kind of thing. Like, but in a sense of, you know, we don't need the romantic partner. It's not what we're here for, even though we're here for each other.
That presumes much about the future. And we talked about this recently. It presumes a lot. And truth is, their chance of survival was more or less zero. Right. And she embraced that, maybe more so than we're comfortable noticing how she's embracing it, whereas everyone else is sort of, I hope to do well and plan for the future.
Right. Yeah. I have to get out of here. I keep fighting I keep trying to improve to survive. If I survive, eventually this will end, and then I can go off and do whatever. Correct. And she was just like, well, that's not the purpose of this. It's not the purpose of us. And I thought that really came across.
And I really had to come up with what the characters' motivations were from the beginning, and it was very hard because, you know, she was, you know, one, Jewish and two, from Poland, and neither of that made her particularly popular in, you know, the Soviet Union. And, you know, I do believe her father, you know, died in the purge, as, you know, you see in the script. And so, you know, it's like, okay, I want to fight the Nazis, well, because they're bad, but I'm representing a government that probably, you know, may just do away with me if I become the slightest bit inconvenient when this is all said and done.
Well, that's why if bodies were not found, they could not be given awards because it was assumed they had gone over to the enemy. Right. Yeah. And by the way, Katya is Ukrainian or Ukrainian, and that's very relevant today. Nothing has really changed. The Ukrainians originally welcomed the German invader as a liberator, and the Germans, fortunately, I guess for the rest of us, messed it up. Right. And so Katya herself would have been politically untenable. Right. So the fact that they're watching each other's backs has some deep, you know, political nuance to anyone that knows that era. And the Soviets today the Russians today are themselves wrapped up in a lot of misinformation. Yep. And we think that this story might be not appreciated in that sphere. But it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Because I think there should be enough interest elsewhere to at least break even. And more likely go further.
The motivation that I came up with her, which I attempted as best to translate to the page without resorting to clumsy dialogue of people just stating what their greater life goal is. But that's, she saw, basically she saw a system that excluded her from ever really participating, except in this moment of crisis, she now had a chance. And she looked at it and said, I can die a hero. Okay. Yeah. And that's what she did, And
I like that. And I think it comes across like I enjoyed the frustration when she was on the the bipedal plane in the beginning, and she's just like, well, if I had a gun, and she kind of already knew the rules and was just like, well, I can't do this. And it's like, well, let's not sugarcoat it.
Right.
Get her in a plane.
Yeah.
And when she gets in a plane, it's like, well, there's not that moment of conflict with her. Can I do this? Can I not do this? That sort of like, she's not a superhero. She doesn't need to have her own origin story. And she's not a scared girl that she needs to have, those sort of basic girl tropes that you see in too many films where it's like, oh, can I do this? Can I hang with the guys kind of thing? It's like, well, yeah, you of course you can. Why are we even talking about this issue? And I like that she kind of jumped right into it and said, okay, give me the damn plane. I'm going to kick your ass from the beginning.
It's almost too bad, and this is what's so hard as an artist, and I know you and your brother must run into this. There's so much you want to tell in a story, and you really can't. Mm-hmm. You have to just take you have to tear it out of the story because you only have a chance to say one thing.
Yeah.
But a good reader then gets inspired, and they're well, what's really going on here, and then they go ahead and they research it and enjoy themselves. But I honestly think it should go backwards, and there should be a novel here, or even some other kind of more factual work, because there's so many things that are fascinating. Let's be clear: the Soviets themselves, their records are very unclear about all of this. Mm-hmm. A lot of kills were attributed to the group that individuals got because that was their system until they realized it wasn't working. And then after Stalingrad, they made it more personal. But also, just like, I'm sorry, I'll make the comparison. I have to. What's the tennis player?
Anna Kournikova.
Anna Kournikova. Yeah. In some ways, I think they thought they had on their hands an Anna Kournikova, and they puffed her up in their own media before she had kills, or before she had more than a couple. And it appears that maybe one of those kills was actually attributed to her that she didn't get. The bomber, in fact, the first bomber. That's unclear. But unlike Anna Kournikova, she went on to be better than even some of the best men Russian fighter pilots. Yeah. And I don't get a sense that she was doing that to prove women were better. I never got a sense in anything we saw.
And we see in the script, where once they've racked up all those kills and, they're being pulled from combat because, no, you're now our propaganda piece and we want to put you out there and show the world, look what we have.
And you saw that in the American...
Yeah, and she's like, that's not what I want.